Amy and the pools. So this is our class review. So we're going to go over all the lessons that we studied for the whole month. So we talked about God and being dead. We talked about evil. We talked about God remembering Noah. Today is our class review. And what we're going to do is go over, well, let me say this. Tuesday night, if you be here, we're going to talk about when you're in a hurry, but God is not. Tuesday night for our Bible study. That's what we're going to talk about there. Okay? So, as I mentioned last Sunday, Zebediah asked Jeremiah, is there a word from the Lord? When you come to Bible class, worship, all you really want to know is what does God say? You're not interested in Brother Adam, Brother Houston. You want, did God give me a message to continue to live? And Jeremiah said, he did. There he is. So here, all of our but God moments involve some sort of grace, mercy, God's favor, God's divine intervention, or God's deliverance. Those are the 5 aspects. And that's not all. I just included those. So in our class review this morning, so when you look at those, then you're going to see this. Now I want you to name at least 2 of those in the class today we're going to study. So just give me 2 things that are attributes of God that go into, that signify a God, but God moment. Grace and mercy. Okay. So, there they are, grace, mercy. Here, sometimes God gives a but God moment, but it's not positive. David said, I plan to build a house for God. God said, you're not going to build my house. I planned it, but God said you're not going to build it, which tells me sometimes we can plan things, but it's not in God's plan. So the next question was, name the guy and then tell me why God wouldn't let him build it. All Tim did was just get ahead of the game. So, which is fine. So who was it? It was David. And David says, no. God told him, no. You got too much. You're a man of war. I do not want you to build my house. But the point is that sometimes we can set out to do things. If we don't talk to God, it's not within his plan. It may be ours, but God orders our steps. That's the first thing. So here's the next one. I was dead. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, we talked about 3 aspects that God did, why man was lost. Man was in a hopeless condition. Verse 1, it says you were dead in your sins. Verse 2 says that you were influenced by Satan. Verse 3 says you were under the wrath of God. There was nothing you could have done to help yourself be better. God was in control of that. So when we look at that and we think about the idea, then verses 4 through 6, God gives us 3 things that he did to help us. First of all, he says he loved us, then he liberated us, and then he lifted us. So those are the things that God did to get, those are the but God pieces that came out of this Ephesian letter. So when you think about that, then my question is going to be, so name 3 things, 3 problems that man had in a hopeless condition. It said that he did what? He was dead in his sins. He was influenced by Satan. He's under God's wrath. Those are the things. And then the other thing was, so what 3 but God moments did God provide? He loved us, he lifted us, and he liberated us. Those are the things that God did in terms of getting us from where we were in a hopeless state now to a state where man now can have some salvation. So we moved on, and we started talking about evil in our lives. So the idea is here, I wanted you to understand, see all those yellow things? Let me see, it's yellow on the screen. Okay. All of that is what God had to do with Joseph. God was with Joseph. God was with Joseph. God was with Joseph. It's a reoccurring theme. What I want you to look at is the Acts chapter. Chapter 7, the Bible said, Jacob's sons were jealous of their brother Joseph. They sold him to slavery. He was taken to Egypt, but God was with Joseph. And he rescued him from all his suffering. Okay, sometimes I don't ever say it much on Anthony, but when we talk about having but God moments, when God helps you through what you're going through, that's got to be a point where God's children get happy. He rescued Joseph from his suffering. Then he says, God gave Joseph favor and wisdom in the presence of Pharaoh. Joseph knew it wasn't him. He knew he was depending on God. So the question is, these are all the things that I put down as, and you might think of some more. These are things that Joseph went through in his trial. He went through, I love the idea. They probably didn't call it human trafficking back then. But when you start selling people, that's all that amounts to. Okay, and Joseph was sold twice. Because when the brothers sold him, then the Midianites sold him. He was sold twice. But through all of that, you don't hear, the Holy Spirit doesn't reveal anything that Joseph did or said, why am I in this? Why am I in this? What's going on? There was a lot of trust. But through all of everything that Joseph went through, Joseph was never outside the protective care of but God. And we are. We're never outside God's but God. We're raised right there. So the question is, the brothers in chapter 50 said, okay, so, see, when you got an evil mind, you start to think, okay, he says, but what if Joseph remembers what we did to him? And what if he wants to get even? What if he's holding a grudge? See, that's what you do when you're kind of an evil person. Then you start thinking, okay, this could all come back on me. All right, look at that. This is what they remembered. They remembered there was an earlier conversation, and those conversations said, those brothers, we saw his trouble, and he begged us to save him, but we refused to listen. That's what they're thinking. You know, they know what they've done. Like when we wrong each other, we know what we've done. It ain't escaped us. We know what we've done. But look at it, it says, so now we are being punished. One thing Reuben didn't do, Reuben says, I told y'all not to hurt that boy. But he didn't separate himself from his brothers. He said, now we are suffering for what we did. But look at what they didn't. That's what they remembered. Look what they forgot. They forgot that Joseph had already told them who he was. And he told them, you don't have to worry about what you've done to me. You know what? Because you sold me here, God sent me here. It wasn't you. That was your piece, but God made this happen. And then he says, and then he tells them why. To make sure you have descendants left on the earth to keep you alive in an amazing way. So it was not you that sent me here, but God. God made me the highest officer in Egypt. And because of that, I am in charge of all the palaces. I am the master of the land of Egypt. I will care for you during the next 5 years of your life. Then he hugged them and they kissed each other. So God now, not God, Joseph is recounting to them the things that God has done for him amid the conflict. Go ahead, Sandra. See, so in all of that, what I want you to do now, what grudges could Joseph have brought back to their faces? He could have said some things to them. He could have told them how much they had hurt him. Not one word. Not one word. What he told them, it wasn't even you. It was God that brought me here. but God brings me here for a purpose. You know what the brothers remembered? They remembered what they had done to their brother. That's what we do. Then what they forgot is that Joseph had already explained to them who sent him to Egypt. He'd already told them why he was. See, not only did he tell them who, he told them why. I'm here because God wanted me to help preserve. I may not even have known it at the time, but now I understand the full scope. How many times did God bless us? And right then, we kind of don't know, kind of see it as a tragedy, or I wish I wasn't going through this. But at the same time, if we fully trust God, we'll keep moving forward. Joseph kept moving forward. And now he says, now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to help you regardless of, I'm not even thinking about what you did. I got so many blessings. I cannot focus on what you have done. I can't focus on that. I got to think about what God has done. So this is all part of our class review. Then we start talking about God remembering Noah. And the idea is the dark side. Here, God and Noah was talking. God saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of his thought and heart was evil continually. And then God tells Noah his plan. What I intend to do, those image bearers, we're made in the image of God. Those image bearers are not doing very well in my image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to blot out man from the face of the earth. Oh, blot that out. But in verse 8, the Bible says, but Noah found favor in God's eyes. Well, I'll jump off. I'm trying to get through the first half of the review. But Noah found favor in God's eyes. So my question was, when we was having the class, your lifestyle is what causes God for you to find favor in God's eyes. It's your lifestyle. It's not what your last name is. It's not that you were born on this day. It's how you live in service to your God. But, so, let's look at this. You know what favor means? If you want to really ask, there's plenty of people you can ask, but ask Noah and ask Joseph. Well, favor is the idea of God intervening, stepping in to your situation, and from that, there's a godly outcome. There's a godly outcome. When you start talking about God's favor, man, what Brother Houston always said, I'd rather have favor than luck. I don't ever want luck. What I want is God's favor to help me where I am. Okay, so let's look at our review. Why did God's image bearers incur the wrath of God? Why did they incur the wrath of God? These are all part of the review questions, Anthony. You okay? What do you do? What did they do? Okay. So I can't hardly wait for you to answer because I got to keep moving. I'm going to try to get through this a second time. They were evil. They thought evil. They were disobedient. And you know what? They had a lukewarm mindset. And God don't have nothing to do with his children when they're lukewarm. But then why did Noah find favor? Because Noah was obedient and Noah had a God-first mentality. So what is favor? Favor is God stepping in, making a difference. And when you're connected to God's favor, you're connected to God's goodness, God's grace, and God's mercy. That's what you're connected to. Okay? So we're back on our review. I just want to go through it again. But the whole thing is, the three things that we talk about as far as what we once were dead, we once were influenced by Satan, and we once were under God's wrath. But God turns it around. So what did God do? He loved us. He liberated us. And he lifted us. That's what God did. So we have no reason to get it to a point where we got to see God's hands through that. If you can't see God's hand in your life as his child, something's wrong. Something's wrong. God in your life makes a difference in your circumstances. Okay? All right. Let's see. Well, so what did he do? He loved us, he liberated us, and he lifted us. What the three problems were: the idea we're dead, we're influenced by Satan, and we're under the wrath of God. What are the three things? God loved us, liberated us, and God lifted us. All the things, I can't tell you again, you ought to be able to put your name in place of Joseph. You ought to be able to put your name. God was with me then. God was with me. I told you all. I may not have told you. I may have told you. But I told you. I have no idea. When I first went to college, when I got in the car with a group of my friends, I don't know how I got out of the car. I don't know where I was. I don't know who put me in the house. I do know one thing. I didn't get back in that car. I'm not going to be that way again. And I'm sure we all got stories that we can spell out and tell. And that's kind of the thing we try to help our children see. I've been 18. I've been 17. You know, I'm not, you're just reliving me. You're my mini-me. That's what you are. You're my mini-me. All right? So, these are all the things that I put down that Joseph went through with his brothers. You know, when we start talking about sibling rivalry, part of that is sibling rivalry. But you know, Miss Potiphar, she would have never had a chance to lie on Joseph if the brothers had not sold him. But it was okay with God. I'm going to protect you. Miss Potiphar lied, sent him to prison. That's okay. I'm going to protect you. Everywhere Joseph went, he found God's favor. He found God's favor. So, I love this point here. Throughout everything that Joseph went through, he never left out. He was never outside the protection of but God. It was never outside that. Joe, that's a joke. Don.
I think with that also, as we consider Joseph and the things that happened with him, we realize and we're blessed to be able to see the end of the story, and then that helps us to understand. But with God's power being God's power, God could have delivered them and positioned them to be where he needed them to be without Joseph going through all of that. You know, and so sometimes I think when we're going through things, a part of us is like, well Lord, can I can it be a little easier? I mean, does it have to be this difficult? I mean, you know, but then I think that's where we have to look at Joseph's story and trust God and his purpose, that ultimately he sees the end from the beginning, and we have to trust his purpose, that he understands why it's necessary that we take this difficult road as opposed to a road that could be a lot easier, because we understand God has the power to make our road a lot easier.
Yep. So I told you last week, what was faith? And we said, faith is when you trust God. What is being faithful? Is when God trusts you. You know, so our lives have to be built on our faithfulness to God. God can trust us. I was going to point out about Job, and I always say this about Job. Every time I think Job, I think James. Because that could easily be what God said. Have you considered my servant James? It's none like him. He's not going to, he already knows. I just hope I'm faithful, so he's using me or using you. God then knows where we are, God knows how to get the best out of us. It's not just living, it's giving God our best. All right, so the brother said, but what if Joseph holds a grudge against us? Yeah, what if he does? But see, that's an evil thinking process, because what happened was, what the brothers remembered, see, this is what we do sometimes. The brothers remembered, you know what? We saw our brother in trouble. We heard him beg us to help him. And you know what we did? Nothing. We did nothing to help him. What God said, and then Benjamin turned around, Benjamin said, Reuben says, so now we are being punished. He did not exclude himself. Even though he told him, I told you not to hurt that boy. But he understood he's still included. Now we're in trouble. But what they again, they didn't see, Joseph had already told them. He had already told them, look, you didn't send me here. I don't even want you to feel bad that you sold me. It was not you. God sent me. And let me tell you why God sent me. So you wouldn't have even thought about this. But God thought about. See, sometimes I can say some things and just right, okay, go ahead, Don.
There's just too much good in this. You know there's just too much good in this. The maturity that it took for Joseph to have that position and to feel the way that he felt, let's just be honest, many of us would not have been there. And we're still not there today.
Right.
We would have held that grudge. We would have taken that grudge to the grave. Let's just be honest. We would have taken that grudge. If your brothers had done something like that to you, you would have never gotten over it. You would have died with it. And you would have never forgiven them. And then, to be honest, they didn't really apologize to him anyway. They said what Daddy said. You know, Daddy said, you know, you should do this or whatever, you know. And so they never even apologized for it. We would have held on to that hurt for as long as we were breathing. Joseph, a maturity level that we can only aspire to.
And think about this. Joseph never even asked them to apologize. God is with me. You can't hurt me. That's the answer. You're going to answer to God for what you've done to me. Telling me something one way or the other, I don't need that. But spiritual maturity is where we got to be. All right, so where's Carrie? I thought I just saw her come in. And she left? Oh, okay. So remember, all those questions that I asked you at the outset, all I want to do is I have them written down. They're not going to be on screen. But I will ask you, Ephesians chapter 2, what did God, verses 1 through 3, what were the three things that would cause us issues in God's eyes? We were dead. We were influenced by Satan. And we were under the wrath of God. And then the same thing, what three things did God do for us? He loved us. He liberated us. And he lifted. God has no intention of his children not being saved. No intention. Okay, so Carrie's still not here? All right. So anyway, that's kind of where we're going to be this morning. Where's Brother Ray? Because, he's out of town. So you have to, Anthony, you have to give his comment, you have to give his speech for, no. Yes, sir. Yes.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.